This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. My email address that I like to give out to everyone is jason@sportspectrum.com. jason@sportspectrum.com. We're so glad you tuned into today's show, and I'd love to have any feedback from you. Maybe you have a thought on today's show. Maybe you have a guest idea. Maybe you just want to say hello. You can reach me directly, jason@sportspectrum.com. We are presented today by the International Justice Mission, and their goal, their hope, is to end slavery in our lifetime, and they are helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence across the world. It's a great opportunity for you to join the fight against violence and oppression with IJM by checking out their website, ijm.org/TF. ijm.org/TF to become a Freedom Partner today. Today on Sports Spectrum, we welcome Jason Wright. He is the team president for the Washington Football Club in the NFL. He's the first black team president in the history of the NFL, named to his position August 17th, 2020. Before his role with Washington, he was an NFL player. From 2004 to 2010, he played running back in the NFL with the 49ers, the Falcons, the Browns, and the Cardinals. And in his words, he was cut a lot. And so he really went through what a lot of guys go through in the NFL, kind of team to team, trying to make it, trying not to get cut. And of course, the numbers game in the NFL dictates that some players, unfortunately, do get let go. Interestingly enough, Jason was undrafted coming out of Northwestern in 2004. And in 2003, he won the Bobby Bowden Award and was a co-MVP of the 2003 Motor City Bowl. He left as Northwestern's fourth all-time leading rusher with 2,625 yards and the third all-time all-purpose yards leader with 4,030 yards. And he's fourth all-time leading scorer, 210 points. So he had a good college career. He turned it into a 6-year career in the NFL, and now the first black team president in NFL history, Jason Wright, joins us here today on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen. Jason, welcome to Sports Spectrum, man.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. So glad that you made some time for us here on the show today. Let's start with the new role. I mean, we've seen it was very publicized, obviously, being being the first black team president in NFL history. So there was a lot of sort of fanfare around that, if you will. I know, doing a lot of interviews, having a lot of opportunities to share and talk, but tell us about the role specifically. I'm not sure that everybody kind of knows exactly what a team president for an NFL team is. So
That's right. I mean, I didn't.
Yeah.
I started having a series of conversations. I think it differs team by team. But I can tell you my role. If Coach Ron Rivera is about wins and losses, I'm about dollars and cents, expanding the value of the franchise, growing the business, and making sure we have, the right engagement with the community, that we're good corporate citizens, that we're building something positive for the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. It's a business leader role.
Yeah, that's good. So in your small amount of time that you've been in this role, or at least publicly been in this role, what's been most encouraging to you? Now, it's only been whatever it's been, a couple weeks, a month, or a little more than a month or so. What's been the most encouraging thing for you just in the short time that you've been in this role?
Yeah, it feels, even you are thinking it's longer than it is. This is day, 9?
Day nine.
Day 9. And that's counting the weekend, because I did work the weekend.
It feels longer.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but the thing that actually has been the most encouraging is that while there are big things we need to do, big challenges, big opportunities, I'm seeing the solutions as rather simple. And frankly, it backs into, who I am as a person of faith. It is very core to, it's just, how do you treat people? Yeah. It's a bit of going back into scripture and understanding, the origin of the golden rule. It is operating with an integrity that's, unimpeachable, or, living above reproach. There's some fundamentals that are related to, integrity, treatment of others, and open communication that are really characterizing my first week in role, and I think are really helping us as an organization, because those principles are timeless. They fit in the church, they fit outside of the church, they fit in spheres of business, they work everywhere. And so, to treat others as you want to be treated, to consider others better than yourselves, to consider the interest of others above your own, to consider yourself nothing, and those sorts of things. And I think those are just general principles that are quite powerful in this moment for me.
Yeah. Tell me about Coach Rivera. You mentioned his name a few times, obviously working alongside him. Every person that I've ever worked with in and outside of the NFL who had any connection to him, whether they played for Coach Rivera, whether they were just in the business at ESPN when I was working there, had nothing but good things to say about this guy. Can you share a little bit about your time with Coach Rivera? I know it's only been a few weeks or so, but maybe you've had a relationship with him prior that obviously led to you kind of working where you're working.
Yeah, I was excited to take this job because he was, going to be my, my partner. And he's just a good man. I think the thing that I admire most about him is that he is anchored in his values. And he is unwavering. He's unwavering. He knows what he believes. He knows how he feels he should run a team. He knows what he expects of the guys on the team, knows what he expects of himself in terms of work ethic, and he just doesn't budge from it. There's a steadiness to him that I admire a lot. That's not actually a character trait I carry. I carry some emotional stability. I'm pretty good at keeping everybody emotionally stable, on the same page, anchored and calm, but I might be all over the place with my schedule, my behaviors, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Coach is a rock. He is a rock. And I think, that consistency, we might call it in the church, steadfastness, is a fruit of the Spirit that he carries quite strongly. And it's what we need at this time as an organization. We need people that will set us in a clear direction that's not going to shift.
Jason Wright is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, the team president for the Washington Football Club and the NFL. How did your playing career prepare you for this role? And we'll talk about your journey in a little bit and kind of how you came through the NFL and your journey as a player. But how did your time as a player prepare you for the role that you're in now?
Yeah, that's a good question. In lots of ways. I'll highlight a couple. This won't be comprehensive. But I think, one of them is, I didn't have a smooth transition to the league.
Yeah.
I got cut a lot in my first few years. And I'll tell a faith-based story that this viewership would appreciate in the midst of that one later on. But
yeah,
I got cut a lot in my first few years, and that did a couple things for me. And I'm really thinking of my rookie year in Atlanta, a year and a half I spent there just on and off the team, just trying to make it. One is that I learned how to find my confidence and find my footing in the face of, rejection, criticism, and failure. Right? There's no more overt failure than being told, you are not good enough to play here.
Yeah.
Therefore, you must leave this building now, and you cannot come back, maybe ever, but most certainly until we invite you back. That is a very overt form of failure. And that can affect you in very deep ways if you've never experienced that before. For me, it was a great moment to find, I guess, what David would have said in the Psalms, a way to encourage myself.
Mm-hmm.
And encourage myself in the Lord, and find a way to find my footing, and remember what I was good at, to remember that I was a darn good running back, and that I was capable at this, and this, and that was my unique skill set, and that's what I brought to the table. and to remember that the next time I went. I think it also helped me get a view of faith in a different aspect. Faith not being, I think a lot of times I thought about faith, and still I think we tend to think about faith as, certainty in the face of uncertainty. I was strong in my faith, so I just knew this was going to happen. I had faith for this. We look at it as like almost a power we carry to change outcomes. And it certainly is that in one aspect. I think the aspect of faith that I learned during that time is that there's an uncontrollable that I cannot control. There's a set of things that are outside of my control, and they may not actually work towards an outcome that feels particularly good to me. And faith is belief and trust without actually understanding it at all, and not actually having to have certainty around any of it. It's being able to sit in the uncertainty and have a measure of peace, even if it's not, confidence in whatever outcome is coming,
Yeah.
And I think I don't think I explicitly learned that then, but it got built in me then. I actually had there was a kicker in Atlanta. His name's Todd Peterson.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Y'all probably know Todd. Todd said something to me during training camp that just really, really helped me. He was like, Jason, I see you're nervous. I see you're worried about getting cut again. He was like, Jason, the general manager can't spit unless Almighty God allows him to. So like nothing is going to happen that's not really already just sort of in motion. And so you got to just sort of relax and sit. And it was a really good aphorism that I've carried forward since then. Even if I hear it now and use it now differently than I used to. I think the last thing is I learned the power of community during that time. Because I was on and off the team, in and out of the locker room. I was living almost 2 hours away from the practice facility because I ran out of money and moved in with my aunt and uncle.
Wow.
I couldn't afford to live there when I was just getting fired every other week on a practice squad salary. So I lived with my aunt and uncle on the east side of Atlanta, and the way that I found strength beyond me was through the community at church and the friends that I made in the area. And we'd just go on adventures on the weekend when I wasn't traveling with the team. We'd go do some community service stuff at the Atlanta Underground, and just hang out and talk together, pray together, spend time. Like there was a power in community and communion, in the real sense of that word. These sort of like the church little c. That was foundational for me. That allowed me, that carried me through that time. So I think those inform my job now in a few ways. Number one, there will be setbacks. There will be things that don't go right. I really know what I'm good at.
Right.
I know what I bring to the table. I am confident in those things. And even if I am beaten back by a bad decision or a circumstance that was unfortunate for me or the organization in our business dealings, I can re-anchor on what I'm good at and what I bring to the table. And I keep a clear-eyed view of that and let my faith practices remind me of it too, so that I walk in with that confidence every day. Secondarily, I most certainly sit in that place of faith, releasing the uncontrollable. This job would be impossible without that. And so saving that space to just not have to know how it turns out, but sit in faith anyway, is very applicable to the job I'm facing currently. And then most certainly building the set of folks around, the importance of community. Very important for me to feel supported in this role, to make sure I have the right people speaking to me, multiple different perspectives informing me just as a person and as a leader and as a man in this role, but also the idea of the importance of connecting to the community as an organization. the role that a football team can play in a community, and the ways in which an institution can really affect change in an area like the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. I think all of those things through my early years in the NFL are very much embedded in me now as a leader.
Quick break to tell you about our friends at IJM, the International Justice Mission, our sponsors and partners here at Sports Spectrum. And I want to tell you a bit about this organization. We care so much about what IJM does. And what many people don't realize is that violence is a threat around the world to those who are poor. It's as much a part of daily life as hunger, disease, homelessness, and so often it's overlooked, but not by IJM. They believe that every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. We, of course, believe that too. And by partnering with local authorities to rescue victims of violence, they bring criminals to justice, restoring survivors, and strengthening justice systems. IJM is helping to protect more than 150 million people across the world from violence. That's a lot of people. It's great work that IJM is doing, but they cannot do it alone. They need your help. They need our help. So I'm reaching out to you to consider joining them and becoming a Freedom Partner. Some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice and their support of $24 or more each month help survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued till they're fully restored. It may not seem like a lot to give, but it's life-changing. So I'm encouraging you to join me in becoming a Freedom Partner. It makes a huge difference in the world. You can visit the website ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF to become a Freedom Partner today. We love to hear sort of testimonies, stories of the faith and how it becomes real in people's lives. Can you kind of share with us a little bit of your story of just coming to faith and where that was embedded and kind of took root for you and maybe really became real to you as in, Jesus being made real to us in our lives, maybe when that took place for you?
Sure. It's gonna be interesting because I don't think I've said it in a long time. So it'd be interesting to hear the language I use. This is good. So I did not grow up Christian, didn't grow up religious, did not grow up a person of faith at all. I shouldn't say at all. My family I'd been to church regularly at different stages, so I had a framework. I probably prayed. I probably said some things publicly in the newspaper about God all the time because that was like a cool thing to do at the time. But I wasn't really a person of faith. And I got to college, and I think I dealt with what many people deal with, and that is a loss of sense of self when you're away from home. It was already there, present, but it just got magnified because I didn't have the comforts and the things that I'm medicated with, whether that was people's applause or whatever it was. And I just felt very alone, isolated in college, and wasn't able to find my social footing because I've always been kind of awkward. And it was just a tough space for me to navigate. And I was trying to do it on my own. And then heading into my sophomore year, at sort of a low point for me, we had a summer workout at Northwestern where a bunch of us, because we were nervous about passing the conditioning test, took supplements that are now illegal. They had an illegal ingredient in it that is banned because it interacts with your heart, and if you're asthmatic, it has major issues. And a bunch of us passed out, and one of my teammates never got up, died right there on the field. He was actually from my hometown, and it was very jarring for me, not because we were super close, like we knew each other, and he was older and sort of, helped me acclimate, but because it was one of my few sources of familiarity when I already felt quite fragile, alone, and struggling. It really, really hit me. Really, really hit me strongly. And it was also compounded with the sense of personal guilt and responsibility, given that we had all participated in it. And I remember, grieving harder and longer than other folks and wondering why. And it just not getting better. Felt other people were healing in their grieving process and I wasn't. And I remember sitting there on the apartment floor, dirty apartment floor, and just crying and remembering the words that a couple of young women that I've been in the dorm with my freshman year had said to me, and both of them were Christian. And, they had talked to me in just a real accessible way about God, the solidity it gave them in times of need. We all studied together. We were all pre-med. We all studied together. So before science tests, like they would pray, I'd make fun of them. Like, well, I went out, drinking and carousing last night, and I got a better grade than you. So I don't know how effective your prayers were.
Yeah.
So I was that guy.
Yeah.
I was that guy. And they just kept being friends to me, And the words that they had said to me around, that solidity that they had, that stability they had in moments that I was lacking in that moment came flooding back. And I remember sort of in a moment of desperation going, all right, God, if you're there and you're this person that they say you are, like, all right, like I'm in, just like make all this better. Just like make all this better. Right. The next morning I felt better, so I tried to renege on it because I was like, I don't really want that. I don't want to really live like them. But I think it already set things in motion. And before I knew it, I was out of one circle of friends in another, surrounded by other people of faith. A lot of Christians, a lot of other people who were people of faith outside of that. But it allowed me to be in a community where people prayed for me. They cared for me in a deep way. I felt comfortable being transparent for the first time in my life, like talking about, some of the deep, dark, and ugly, going on inside of me that I never really shared with anybody at any point. And, that for me as a person who, come to realize years later was very steeped in shame of various different types was very important for me to feel like you could be in a community where you could be yourself and people would still accept you in some measure. And I went to a great church, the Evanston Vineyard Church, probably still to date the best church I've ever been to, that created that environment as well. And, somewhere along the way, I converted to Christianity and became a follower of Christ at some point. And I don't have a moment that I can point to, but before I knew, it's almost like you start doing the stuff, and before you know it, it's who you are.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. And, learning to, hear the Christ for myself on the inside of me, and be led and feel like things are being divinely guided. That whole journey started there, at age 20. And, and from there, the advantage of going to the NFL, rightly or wrongly, is that you get your unfair access to amazing leaders in the church.
Yeah.
They give you their pulpit on a Sunday if you don't know what the heck you're talking about.
That is true.
Which is an interesting thing about sports ministry that lasts to this day. Like, oh, you're one of us? Here you go, talk to my congregation. Well, let me tell you, I probably said some wild-ish back then. But the fortunate thing for me was, some really good mentorship and growth during that time period to, flesh out my faith. I guess we call it discipleship. I got a good dose, a good, really healthy, intense dose because of playing in the league. And then that allowed me to, start to find my place and way of expressing service as a person of faith at that stage.
You mentioned being cut multiple times. You said a lot, as to quote you exactly, cut a lot in the NFL during your journey. You were undrafted, and you kind of really had to live out that tough NFL life that a lot of guys have to live through as a player. And then you mentioned earlier you had a story connected to all of that. So can you share that?
Yeah. When I was getting drafted, or not getting drafted, the process of not getting drafted, I was a new believer, new person of faith. And I thought, okay, well, we're getting to the end of the draft. It looks like I might not get drafted. What would a Christian do? They would pray. I'm like, let me go pray.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, I don't really know how to pray, but whatever you want to do here, can you do what is the best thing in your God brain? Amen. Something like that. I think I might have tried to pray again, put some song lyrics in. And after the first time I prayed, I got a call from the Atlanta Falcons, and it was the running backs coach. He said, hey, I just want to introduce myself. We can't offer you as much money as some of the other squads, because we drafted a running back, et cetera, but we really like you here. I think there's a place for you here. I remember hanging up and thinking, like, that can't be it, because they had a great starting running back, a great backup, a third down back / fullback, and they had just drafted a really high-performing college running back. That is not the place for me. No way. So then I prayed again. I put some more song lyrics in. I don't know what else I did. Maybe I did the dance. I don't know. Said amen, and I get a call from the general manager of the Falcons. Who's like, "Hey, I just want to make sure you got the call from a running backs coach. We really like you. Hope you consider us." I remember thinking, like, "Oh, ish. I think I'm supposed to go to Atlanta." But it was my decision, and I couldn't make that decision. It was too illogical for me. And I chose to go to the 49ers instead. And I had a great experience there. I learned a lot about myself, but I also got cut in about 2.5 weeks. And I remember being at home, miserable, with my parents. In your parents' house after all that time is just not the place you want to be.
Right.
And I remember having a conversation with my parents and then just praying again. Actually, it was with my mom. Mom and I were praying. And I said, all right, God, like, if this whole NFL thing was just to teach me to, have more trust in what I'm feeling, what I'm hearing, the signals I'm getting from the indwelling within me. Like, all right, I got it. I'll roll with that. But if any of the stuff that I thought was possible, the NFL is still there, can you restore it? And no bull. I got a call from my agent right after that. He says, congratulations, you're an Atlanta Falcon. It was just like, it's some of those moments that are just so overt that they're hard to track, and hard to retell. I'm even thinking back on it. I'm like, gosh, it really happened that way. It really did happen that way.
Yeah.
And, it really helped establish, for me, an understanding of, I guess, an ability to trust the things that exist outside of my control, but, along that journey, like, things have evolved over time. And I think, God takes us through different lessons at different stages, and that very miraculous start and many other stories like that over the years of my NFL career, I think in recent years have been, much more pragmatic and much more, they're much different. The stories have been much different, but no less miraculous, and one of the reasons I reached out to you all is, like, a big part of the journey for me over the last period of time has been understanding the need to address things comprehensively, to think about my mental health alongside my spiritual health, and seeing those things as in concert, as one expression of the temple of God, and my health and my effectiveness as a vessel for Christ in the world. And, so for me, the last, better part of the decade since I retired has been an intense, mental health journey that, most of the churches I was a part of were ill-equipped to lead me through. And things that I would have, very boldly talked about, praying away or praying through, really needed the guidance of somebody with professional expertise melded with the ability to draw on the Christ within, that have made me a very different person, changed my family, but all made it very much for the better. It's shifted my theological thinking in important ways, but has been really, really critical. And, so at this stage in my journey, the things feel slightly less dramatic and miraculous, but also quite stable, quite solid, and deeply, deeply healing in a different way than I experienced, in those early years.
Yeah. This has been great. As we wind down, I want to ask you, because a lot of people might not know that whole 10-year history. And obviously we don't have an hour to go deep into it, but can you walk us through the post NFL world that you entered into? Because a lot of people struggle with that, and then kind of where you've been and what that's taken you through to get to where you are today back here with Washington.
Yeah, I'll touch on it really quickly, and I do have to hop here in a moment. But the big thing with the transition from the NFL was letting go of so much of your identity that is wrapped around what you've done for so long. I've been a football player since I was 7 years old. At that time, I was 29, about to be 30. That's a long time. That's a long time. And like it or not, so much of how I thought of myself and more importantly, the value I had in the world and my ability to have impact in the world, my mission to the world was rooted in that identity. Nothing more so than having a platform to speak about the issues I care about, like many players are doing right now around racial equity, police practices, racial disparities in the economy, like how many athletes are rightly, and I'm encouraging this, raising their voices on those topics. I was raising it on different things at the time, whether it was my faith and spirituality or economic development in the inner city or education reform at the time. Those were some of my themes. I felt like when I left that, nobody was going to give a you-know-what about what I had to say. And that was a very hard thing for me because when I did transition out, actually nobody did. The reality was nobody did.
Yeah.
And that was a very hard thing for me because I hadn't found another place to find my impact. I hadn't valued myself in other ways outside of, the platform I had to use my voice. And, that drove issues in me, first of all, in mentally and spiritually, psychologically. That drives issues in your family. That drives issues in your personal relationships. And it took me a long time to find my footing, to go back into past trauma with the combined help of pastors and psychologists to really go in and deeply heal those areas of past trauma that actually produced that response in me. It wasn't actually leaving the NFL that was the issue. It was all these other things that had happened to me over the course of my lifetime that crystallized and catalyzed, a painful set of things that were debilitating to me at the time. And, by grace, my wife and I made our way through it and are making our way through it day by day.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Jason. This has been great. All the best to you. Congrats on the new position, and hopefully we'll have you back on again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
And many thanks to Jason Wright for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. He was very generous with his time, and I know he was pressed at the end there, but he was awesome. And I thought, what a deep thinker. What a very smart guy when you think about Washington and him being named as team president, the first black team president in the history of the NFL. He's got the goods, Jason, and he's really good at what he does. He even said that he knows he's good at what he does and where his lane is. And I know he'll do a great job with Washington, and wish him nothing but the best. We thank him for joining us here on Sports Spectrum. You can follow him on Twitter. He is, just search Jason Wright. His handle is whoisjwright. And I love his humility, just understanding that it's not about him. It's not even about Washington. It's about something bigger and pointing people back to the Lord. So thank you to Jason Wright for joining us here today on the show. We also want to thank our partners, IJM, the International Justice Mission. You check them out at ijm.org/TF to become a freedom partner and join IJM in the fight against slavery. ijm.org/TF. We also want to direct you to our website, sportspectrum.com. That's the home base for all of the content here at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. We have articles, daily devotionals, and of course, every single podcast right there on the website, sportspectrum.com. I would recommend you bookmark that website because we have new content going up every single day during the week. And lastly, whatever app that you're listening to this podcast on, do us a favor and click that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. And we've been blessed to release over 500 plus episodes and interviews that we've shared here on the show. And we're just about at 2 million downloads of the podcast as well. So you have been amazing in listening and then telling others about this show. We're grateful and we're thankful for you. Thanks for tuning in. And of course, we'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. My name is Jason Romano. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.